That's the stamp I need to catch. I'm Alan Andrews and I'm here at Upper Tamar Lakes. I'm here practicing for the Preston Innovations Feedermasters final, which I'm absolutely stoked to have made. That's next weekend. I've got the Peg #1 media team here. They've been videoing me all day. I've caught over 200 skimmers. It's been an awesome day's fishing. You're really going to enjoy the video. They've filmed how I approach a big natural venue like this, what type of ground baits I use, which is obviously the Peg #1 premium baits, but which ones I use and how I mix them, and then how I adjust them during the day. So I hope there's lots of tips and tricks there for you guys to put more fish into your net. So, just done my first cast. Hoping to get some action straight away. I'm just holding a rod in my hand, not put it down on a rest. I'm kind of hoping that there'll be some fish lying out there and that tip's going to go round. First cast, and we're into what we come here for. A nice skimmer. Most venues, especially natural venues, I'll be putting out a feed to start off with, so I'll be baiting the area up. Most of the matches that I fish, it has to go in via a feeder. You're not allowed to handball it in. So I use a big bait up feeder like this. Obviously, I'll put some ground bait in there now. You can see that holds a lot of bait. What I will be doing though, is I'll be adding some particles into that. So it'll be chopped worm, it could be some maggots, might be some dead reds or pinkies. So I get a nice bed of bait out there. Once that's out there, I tend to leave it for a little while before I fish over the top of it. If there's not much tow, then I can start using just open end cage feeders. I can use metal ones, or I could use plastic style ones. The bait starts releasing as soon as it hits the water, and then obviously that will trickle down. Most of it will get down to the bed, but if it's very deep, you could have a lot of bait trickling down, and if you've got a tow, that will start drifting off. And you don't want that to happen if you've got a guy in the swim next to you, because it's taking all your fish away and it's going to start catching them. So if you have got a tow, then I've got an array of what we call window feeders. Now, as you can see, these haven't got much of an area for the bait to come out. So all you've got is a small window here, and all the bait just goes in there, and that just gets straight down to the bottom. There's lots of different types of these, and what's really good now is they're developing window feeders which are a bit like a cage feeder. So it does get down quickly, but it does release a bit of bait as well. So it's very diverse. So make sure when you get to your peg, first thing you do, get a bit of water, get your soap, get your ground bait out and get it mixed up. The ground bait mixes I use are the premium bait from Peg #1. My main staple is the Mayhem Green. It's a really diverse bait. As you can see, it's predominantly green. It's quite a coarse ground bait, and it's predominantly pellet based. The good thing about it is an amazingly inert ground bait. So you can fish that ground bait dry. As long as it clamps up into a ball, it will still get down. Or you can wet it up as much as you want, and it will still come back to you. A really, really good diverse ground bait. So what I tend to do for a big natural venue like this, it's got a lot of fish in it, it's prolific fishing, is I tend to use a whole bag, which is 1 kilo, of the Mayhem Green. It goes in. And the other one I mix with it, as a 50-50, is the Bream and Skimmer mix. Completely different ground bait really. It's a much finer ground bait, and as you can see it's more brown. Once again, it's pellet based and it's fairly coarse, but it's a lot finer. And it just adds a bit of stability and it lightens up the green. So I use a whole bag of that as well. If the fish get spooked in any way, shape or form, obviously, because they get over the ground bait, the sun's shining down and it just looks strange, they'll just back off. So one of the things I do, if it's a clear water, or if it's not really coloured, is I add some of the Squid and Krill Black ground bait. Now today, the water has got colour in it. It's not really coloured, but it has got colour in it. So I'm just going to add a small amount of this to my ground bait, just to add a little bit of colour to it. Once again, it's a very versatile ground bait. It is pellet based, but it's very fine, as you can see. Once again, it's a sort of ground bait you can wetten up and it'll come back to you. So as you see, I've used about 1/4 of a bag. Then all I do is whisk it up. And as you can see, it's not really dark, but it's dark enough. Now, one of the little tricks I've learned using a peg number 1 bait is peg number 1 do some pellet soaks. They do a number of pellet soaks, but this is the Mayhem Betaine Green. Now, obviously you can add a lot of water to this, and I have got my water here, but one of the little tricks I use is I empty a whole bottle of this into the ground bait. If you ever buy a bottle of this and just tip a little bit into the water, you can see how it creates a nice cloud. So when I first start fishing, obviously I want to attract the fish into my swim. And one of the key things, I believe, is putting this into my ground bait, because it doesn't take any feed away, so the fish aren't going to get full up. But what they're going to do is they're going to get a sense from this cloud that's created, and they're going to want to come in and then find my ground bait and sit on it and keep feeding. So a whole bottle of this goes in. That is smelling nice as well. So there we go. As you can see, now that's not quite wet enough for what I need, so I'm going to add some water to that now and then give it a bit more of a mix. Right then guys, I've left it another 15 minutes. I'll just give it a little whisk up, and as you can see now, it's absolutely perfect. Makes nice balls, but it breaks down perfect. That's exactly how I want it. Right guys, so as you can see, I'm on my box, in the swim, got myself all set up. Ground bait's here on my side tray. So the first process that I go through is just having a little feel out on the bottom, just to see how deep it is, seeing if there's much tow out there. Once again, I'll explain the tow. Obviously you get like undercurrents in open venues, you get it on rivers as well, obviously, and what you don't want to do is not realise it, put a load of bait out there and it all get drifted away because you've not fished your bait wet enough to get down to the bottom. So I'll just use a little lead, and I have a cast out there and I'll slowly bring it back. I'm fishing with braid, so I can really feel the bottom. What I'm looking for is a nice steady pull back without hitting any stones. So I basically into a little bit of silt. But what I want to do is I want to feel the stones as well. So I want to be just into that silt, not too far in. I want to be near the stones, just into the silt. So maybe 2 or 3 metres into the silt maximum. The reason for that is the fish do feed around the stones, but they really feed happily on the silt. But they need to be confident to come off of them stones and get onto the silt. But once you get them onto the silt, obviously there's no nooks and crannies for the bait to disappear. It's just a lovely bed out there and they can feed more confident. So like I say, all I use is a little lead. I've done that process, I found my spot. I've also had a bit of a count out there, and it's quite deep. I would say I've probably got about 12 to 15 foot of water, and I'm only fishing at 16 metres. So it's quite deep. So with that, I need to make sure that my bait is wet enough to get down there. It's not all emptying out. But there isn't much tow, so I don't need it to be really wet. So I've actually just kept it as I mixed it up, as you saw it earlier on. So it's exactly the same. So it's wet enough, as you can see. It's a little squeeze and it goes into a nice ball. So first thing I do is I do baiting up. So before I've even got a hook on, my other rods are set up here, but this is my baiting up rod. See, I've got a big baiting up feeder. I want to get a better bait out there. So this is a prolific venue with lots of fish, but what I don't want to do is overfeed it. So what I'd advise is you just put 3 or 4 out to start off with, and then see how it goes. If you get bites straight away but then they disappear very quickly, put another 3 or 4 out there. If you really know a venue really well, sometimes you may put 16 of these out there. If you're fishing for big bream, big open wild venues, you want to get a nice big bait, better bait out there, because you want them fish to hone in, and once they come in they stay there. but you've got to know the venue really well to be confident to do that. So I've got an array of particle baits here, maggots, dead reds, I've got corn, I've got some peg number 1 micros, I've got some casters, and I've also got some chopped worm. And what I'll do is I'll just put a little bit of each of those in there. So I'm going to put a pinch of casters, pinch of micros, little pinch of chopped worm. Don't feed too much chopped worm to start off with, because if the fish don't want it, it can kill your swim. So I'll just put a little bit out there, and then got a few pinkies there and a few dead reds. All I'll do is I'll just push them into the feeder, and then I'll cap it off at the top and the bottom with the ground bait. So ground bait at the bottom, ground bait at the top, and that's full of all of that particle bait in there. And I've not squeezed it too hard, because all I'm going to do is cast that straight into the peg. I'm going to pick a spot so it hits that same spot every time. Wait till that hits the bottom. Once that hits the bottom, I'll then just a couple of quick jerks back, and that empties it. If I squeeze that in there too hard, it's not going to empty out, and I'm going to bring it all back through the whole of the swim, and I don't want that. I want it to be in that spot. So let's get it out there. So I've picked my spot, I've got a gap in the trees, and I'll just be aiming for that. It's not a far chuck, just a little chuck. As you can see, I've got a line clip, so it's going to hit that same spot every time. I didn't explain that earlier, I do apologise. So when you found your nice little spot out there, you clip it up on your spool. That's still dropping, that's just hit the bottom now, so you can see how deep it is. And all I do is just tighten up, a couple of little jerks, and that's emptied now. You can feel it's empty, it's coming in very easy. So I know that bait's got exactly onto the spot where I want it, ready for them fish to feed. Like I say, I'll put 2 or 3 out there to start off with, leave it a little while, and then I'll fish over it, and hopefully the fish will be there. Right, going to get the rest of my gear set up properly, and I'll come back to you once I'm starting fishing. Here we go, first cast guys, and we're into a fish. First cast, and we're into what we come here for. A nice skimmer. That's a stamp I need to catch. I was getting lots of line bites, lots of little touches, but they weren't really taking it properly. So I've actually stopped putting particle bait now in my feeder, and I'm just putting pure ground bait in there. Now it is a window feeder, but it's a caged window feeder. It's absolutely brilliant invention really, because it kind of ticks both boxes. It gets the bait down there, but it also does release a small amount on the way down to bring them fish in. And I've had 3 casts now with just putting ground bait with no particle. And I've had 3 really good bites and 3 really nice bream. Skimmer bream. So that tip's moving now. And that's fish on. By putting too much particle in, just gives them too much to feed on. Now by cutting that out, I'm getting quicker bites. There you go, nice skimmer. Obviously, that may dry up and the bites may slow. So then you need to start putting more particle out there. You just need to chop and change as the day goes on. What I am going to do now though, is I'm going to wet my ground bait up a little bit. So there's not so much releasing from the feeder on the way down. It's quite deep out there. It's just getting straight down to the deck. I know there's a lot of fish out there now. Now I really want to get them to hone in on my ground bait. So I'm going to get my atomizer, going to spray up a small area of my ground bait and make it a bit wetter and start using that. It might not work, but it might actually really get them to hone in that one area. Got my atomizer pressured up, letting some water out. So what I do, the key thing is to just literally partition your ground bait. So you want to keep your original mix. So you push that to the back of your tub and then literally just pull a small bit that you want to wet up into the corner. And all you do, spray your atomizer over it, give it a mix up till you get it to the consistency that you want. That way, if it doesn't work, you've just kind of wetted up a small part of your ground bait and you can go back to your original mix. And what will happen is over the time of the day, that area there that you've wetted up will dry out as well if it's no good. Obviously, if it works, you can just keep pulling your ground bait forward and keep wetting it. So what I'm noticing now is I'm not getting so many liners, which is what I thought would happen. And there we go. Tiny little liner, and then the tip went straight round, which is what we want. All that is just because I've wetted the ground bait up. There we go. So once you know you've got the fish in the swim, there's plenty of them, you're getting lots of liners. Little trick, just wet that ground bait up, try and get the fish to settle. Well, there we go, guys. It's another skimmer, pretty sure of it. It's going to be my last one of the day. I've caught over 200 of these skimmers today. I've had to chop and change a few things, as you've seen on the video. Wetting my ground bait up, and I've had to go back, obviously, to my original mix, and I've had to wet it up again, putting different particles out there, all the time, just changing little different things to keep them bites coming. Obviously, I hope you enjoyed the way I approached one of these big open venues. Obviously looking at what's on the bottom first of all, how much toad's in the water, obviously the colour of the water to how you're going to mix your ground bait up, and obviously the way I bait it up, the process of baiting up, and then the different types of feeders that I use. I've really enjoyed the day today, and I can't wait to come back next weekend for the Feedermasters final. Hope you enjoyed the video, and I hope I've given you lots of tips and tricks for you to put more fish like this in the net.